Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is June the 25th, 2024. It has been 3,802 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 126 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years, 4 months and 2 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Monday and Tuesday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. The Russia-Ukraine war report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. There are only small changes from yesterday, so if you want to skip ahead, that's okay. I won't even know. 1. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 2. Russia is setting conditions to commit further acts of aggression in Europe. 3. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed over 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 2 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court on March the 5th. 4. Russia's trampling of international humanitarian law has been accelerating since March the 22nd. We maintain that the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs is encouraging escalation. 5. Autocrat Putin is continuing the largest purge of the Russian Ministry of Defense, led by the FSB, since Joseph Stalin's 1936 to 1938 purge. 6. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Yesterday, Russian attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure wounded at least 61 and killed 11. Russia launched 3 Caliber cruise missiles from the Sea of Azov and 2 Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles from occupied Crimea. Only 1 Caliber was intercepted. Updating from yesterday's podcast, 2 Caliber cruise missiles struck 2 warehouses at the distribution center for the supermarket chain Tavria-V, burning a 3,000 square meter warehouse and damaging another 21,000 square meters of space holding grocery products. 4 people were wounded. 70 apartments in 2 nearby buildings were damaged by flying debris and the concussive force. The financial loss to Tavria-V was between $7.5 and $10 million. In the Donetsk Oblast, Pokrovsk was hit by 2 Iskander-M SRBMs in a double-tap attack. The first struck a residential area at noon, with the second hitting 30 minutes later. 5 people were killed and 46 wounded, including 4 children aged 9 to 12, with recovery efforts ongoing. In the Kharkiv Oblast village of Slobozhanska, 9 kilometers from the fighting in Luhansk, 2 civilians were killed when the car they were in ran over a Russian scatterable anti-tank landmine. Russia and Ukraine are not signatories of the Ottawa Convention, but the deployment of landmines in known civilian areas is a violation of international humanitarian law. In the Donetsk Oblast settlement of Toretsk, 1 civilian was killed and another wounded due to Russian shelling. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, bombed Kurakhove, killing a pensioner. Drushkivka was hit by Smerch rockets with cluster munitions, wounding 1 civilian. In the Kherson Oblast, Russia shelled the village of Stepanivka. The overnight attack killed a 40-year-old civilian in his home as he slept and wounded 3 others. Russia shelled the village of Gavrilivka with 48 artillery rounds, killing a 71-year-old woman in her home and wounding a 63-year-old man who is in hospital. Russian forces shelled Nikopol in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, wounding 4 people, with 1 in hospital. On Tuesday morning, shelling wounded a pensioner who is also in hospital. Here is today's action report. On Sunday, Russia carried out 129 assaults, and through Monday evening, 135 had been recorded. Through June the 23rd, the 7-day moving average climbed to 143. Ukrainian sources reported that while the number of attacks has increased, the number of troops and armored vehicles involved has declined. We've read your emails and comments, and by popular request, what is mutually assured destruction, and what is the mutually assured destruction paradox? During the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the West created a detente of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. If you attack me with your nuclear weapons, even if you surprise me, I'll have enough weapons left over to ensure that I can destroy you in retaliation. Both countries created the nuclear triad of strategic aviation, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and submarines to deliver their arsenals. The triad and the command and control put into place assured that even if both countries were destroyed in first strikes, the final revenge would be carried out. And for right or wrong, MAD worked. From 1946 to 2022, there weren't any regional wars that spilled over into continental or global conflicts. The mutually assured destruction instability paradox is when one nation decides that they have enough weapons to destroy its enemy, and the belief that its enemy fears nuclear war so much it would never retaliate. And because their leaders believe they will never be attacked, they become an aggressor state, attacking whomever they choose, creating regional, continental, and eventually global instability. The paradox lies in the understanding that an opponent has enough weapons to destroy civilization as we know it, but the belief that their fear of ending civilization permits the other side to do whatever they want. Russia's expanded war of aggression was partially fueled by the lack of response to the invasion of Georgia in 2008 and the West's weak response to the 2014 illegal occupation of Crimea. Putin and his inner circle became convinced that the West would not help Ukraine, contributing to the paradox. The conducting of tactical nuclear drills in May, repeated nuclear threats from Moscow, and Russia's increasing kinetic hybrid warfare across Europe is why we believe the world is struck in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. Now, let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. Ready? Here we go. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Liptsi-Vovchansk area of operation, or AO. Fighting continued in Vovchansk, with no significant change in the situation. Russia claimed the VKS dropped a FAB-3000 UMPK glide bomb on Ukrainian positions, but the video and damage are more consistent with the FAB-1500. In an earlier podcast, I explained why Russian tactical aviation can't deliver the FAB-3000. West of Vovchansk, in Staritsa, Ukrainian forces made additional gains into the center of the settlement. North of Liptsi, fighting continued in Hlyboka. In the Kupiansk AO, Russian forces continued their attacks in the direction of Sinkivka, Stepova-Novoselivka and Peshchane, with no change in the situation. In the Svatove AO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces continued their attacks east of Stelmachivka and in the direction of Kopanki from occupied Sergeyivka without success. In the Crimea AO, Russia carried out attacks in the direction of Grekivka, Makiyivka, Nevske, Torske and in the Serebryanka woods. Finally, in the Siversk AO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces made new attempts to advance on Bilogorivka after an extended pause in fighting. there was no change in the situation. Let's talk about the Donbas and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. Russian forces carried out 21 assaults in the Siverskoye of the Donetsk Oblast. Fighting intensified in the direction of Verkhnyokamyansk from Zolotarivka, but Russian troops could not overcome the challenges of the terrain. Fighting continued southeast of Vyimka and in the area of Rozdolivka. In the Kostantinivka AO, Russian forces carried out 9 assaults, with ongoing fighting in Kalinivka and the eastern edges of the Canal district of Chasiv Yar. Attacks on the western edge of Ivanivske, near Klishchiivka and in the direction of Andriivka were also repulsed. In the Toretsk-New York AO, heavy fighting continued in the areas of Pivdenne with no change in the situation. In the southwestern part of the Donetsk Oblast, the heaviest fighting continues to be in the Avdiivka AO, where Russian forces carried out at least 45 assaults. Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Alexandropol remained unsuccessful. A geolocated video showed Russian forces in the northwestern part of Novo-Alexandrivka, indicating that there had been another advance. Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Vozdvizhenka, Yevgenivka, Novoselivka, Persha and deeper into Sokil were unsuccessful. Further south, fighting continued near Umanska. Russian mercenary mill blogger Wogonzo reported fighting continued in Yasnobrodivka without evidence, adding that, quote, Russian troops continued to advance on the outskirts of Karlivka. In the Vuhledar AO, fighting continued in Krasnogorivka, on the eastern edge of Georgiivka, and in Paraskoviivka. In the Vremivka AO, Ukrainian forces repulsed 4 attacks in the southern part of Urozhaine. Russian sources confirmed that last week a Russian Ka-29 helicopter was shot down by friendly fire, killing all 4 crew members. The helicopter was searching for Ukrainian uncrewed surface vessels during an ongoing attack when the friend or foe system malfunctioned. It is believed that Russian air defenses mistook the helicopter for a Ukrainian drone. The Wall Street Journal reported that Ukraine's Mahura Mag-5 Sea Baby uncrewed surface vessels were modified in 2023 to deploy 180 kg sea mines that are made of plastic, making them harder to detect. 4 Russian vessels have hit the mines, including the Project 1239 Bora-class guided missile corvette Samum, the patrol boat Pavel Derzhavin, and the tugboat deployed to aid the vessel, and an unnamed minesweeper. In the last week, 3 more bombs have been dropped on the Belgorod region by the VKS. On June the 21st, Fab 500 bombs landed near the village of Churaevo and Razumnaya. On June the 20th, a bomb fell in Krutoy Log, landing on Yesenin Street without exploding. Since February the 1st, 106 bombs have fallen off of Russian aircraft. A fire tore through the Platan Research Institute in Fryazino, a suburb of Moscow. 8 people were killed, including 2 who leaped to their death to escape the flames and smoke. 2 were injured, with 1 in critical condition. Initial reports said the building was a manufacturing site for electronic equipment for the Russian military, which was later denied by Russian state media. Workers said the complex had metalworking shops, welding and machining shops, electronics assembly, furniture production, and an assembly line for industrial washing machines. It took 7 hours to bring the fire under control, and 2 people are still missing.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Here is my theater-wide update. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky announced that Lieutenant General Yuri Sodol, the Joint Forces commander of Ukraine, was relieved of his command the day after the Chief of Staff of the Azov Brigade, Bogdan Krotevich, called for a criminal investigation. Brigadier General Andriy Ignatov was named the new Joint Forces commander. General Sodol remained the commander of the Khortytsia Special Operations. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned United States Ambassador Lynn Tracy due to the missile debris that landed on a Sevastopol beach near Saki military airfield. Over 150 people were wounded and 5 killed. The Kremlin accused the United States of waging a hybrid war against Russia and being a party in the defense of Ukraine. The démarche went on to threaten the US and Ukraine, stating there would be a, quote, response to this crime, unquote. After the Moscow meeting, US State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller spoke with reporters.
Crimea, I will just tell you what the ambassador said when she met with the Russian Foreign Ministry, and that is, of course, that we lament any civilian loss of life in this war. We provide weapons to Ukraine so it can defend its sovereign territory against armed aggression. That includes in Crimea, which, of course, is part of Ukraine. And Russia could stop this war today and end the suffering caused by the war Russia launched today if it would stop its occupation of sovereign Ukrainian territory and stop launching attacks on civilians.
France said that it was on track to provide Ukraine with 600 AASM Hammer precision bombs through 2024. After Russian autocrat Vladimir Putin's state visit to Vietnam, Bui Thanh Son, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, told reporters, quote, Vietnam considers the United States a strategic partner and supports the strengthening of cooperation between the United States and the countries of Southeast Asia, which will contribute to peace, stability and development in the region and around the world, unquote. And over the weekend, South Korean National Security Advisor Cheng Ho-jing said that if Russia provides modern weapons or technology to North Korea, it will be a red line, and Seoul will start to supply Ukraine with lethal military aid. Quote, I would like to emphasize that everything depends on what Russia will do. Returning to Moscow, Putin told reporters, quote, We can only count on ourselves in that regard. No one is going to lend us a hand and give anything to us. We're all on our own. Yes, all on your own. With help from Iran, North Korea, China, Western countries that are circumventing sanctions, a complicit International Committee of the Red Cross, OPEC. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced that Russia would be officially and finally withdrawing from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Russian Federation Council Speaker Valentina Matviyenko was asked to draw up the draft resolution that would end Russia's participation in the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. The Ministry of Internal Affairs has started conducting sweeps of large businesses across Russia, rounding up migrants and taking them to the military commissariat. There, they are threatened with arrest, imprisonment or deportation if they don't sign military contracts. A raid in the city of Krasnodar netted 203 immigrants, and one in Moscow rounded up 45. Russian propagandist, male blogger and former private military company Wagner Group mercenary Igor Guzenko, better known as 13th, released a 6-minute video showing disabled Russian military personnel kept in inhuman conditions. The basement dungeon held severely wounded Russian troops, including amputees, who get almost no medical care and are sent back to the front as soon as they are mobile enough. Multiple Russian sources have claimed these basement prisons for the wounded and refuseniks existed, but this was the clearest view ever provided, and yes, we link to the video. Guzenko, who has run afoul of Russian authorities for his social media posts in the past, had a meltdown. Quote, "Everything that the presidential administration media tells you on TV is complete bullshit. This is the true attitude towards soldiers by the command. They keep everyone like cattle. the wounded, the untreated, the mobics, the contractors. For many things, they make disabled regiments out of them. And do you know why? Yes, because there are not enough people. Guzenka ended his video still believing in the chain of command, claiming he had provided the location and all of the evidence gathered to military prosecutors. Supporting that Russian battlefield medicine barely exists, a Ukrainian drone recorded the advance of a Russian squad through the open. One of the soldiers becomes wounded and stops another member of his unit, pointing over and over at his head. The second soldier, without hesitation, shoots his wounded comrade in the head 3 times. In our assessment, these kinds of acts, which are increasing in frequency, are done out of hopelessness. Wounded Russian troops are rarely evacuated from the battlefield and are punished for becoming wounded. Everything is going to plan. On June the 22nd, the former head of Patriot Media Holdings, once owned by Wagner Group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, Ilya Gorbunov, and the editor-in-chief of Konkretno, Kirill Metelev, were arrested by the Federal Security Service of Russia. Both are being investigated for extortion. Patriot Media Holdings was Wagner Group's oppositional marketing firm, used by political groups around the world to spread disinformation and sway political opinions to be supportive of Moscow's interests. Gorbunov used to work for Komsomolskaya Pravda and RIA Novosti and ran Prigozhin's troll factories. At the time of Prigozhin's insurrection, Gorbunov led Wagner Group's public relations and messaging inside and outside of Russia. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.